No, I didn't see a green light, so I was waiting for a green light. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday, October 28, 2021 meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority for the City of Edina. We've got a few things we need to call folks' attention to before we start the meeting. There will, in this hybrid environment that we're working in, we have people both in chambers, and we also have people that tune in online. Some are watching on cable TV at edinamn.gov/live meetings, or you can go to facebook.com/edinamn. There's only one time you're going to be able to participate in the HRA meeting this morning, and that is in community comment. We don't have any public hearing matters this morning. And I'm going to give you the conference ID number in case you want to call in. That number is 800-374-0221. 800-374-0221. You see it up on the screen now. And then the conference ID there is present as well, 459-1604. 459-1604. Give the operator your name and street address and your phone number. Press *1 on your telephone keypad when you would like to get in the queue to speak. And then a city staff member, Director Bennerat from our communications department, will introduce you when it's your turn to speak if you're calling in. And then we'll, of course, call on folks that are here in chambers first. So with that having been said, we're going to commence this hybrid meeting, and we'll call the meeting to order and ask Liz Olson, our administrative specialist, to do the roll call. Ms. Olson.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Staunton.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We've got a form of meeting agenda that's been published to both the HRA members and the general public. And is there anyone that wishes to modify the agenda in any form, staff or commissioners? All right, is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second to approve the meeting agenda. Motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda as shown, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now we are at the community comment portion of the meeting. And so, again, a reminder for those that are watching online, if you want to call in and address the HRA on any matter that's not on the agenda this morning or scheduled for a future public hearing, a reminder again, it can't be on the, if you want to speak about something, can't be on the agenda this morning or scheduled for a future public hearing. Please feel free to call in. You can call in now. The 800 number is 800-374-0221. And then the conference ID is on the screen right now, 459-1604. And do we have anyone in the audience who wishes to address the HRA on a matter of concern to them? All right, we have nobody in the audience that wishes to speak to the HRA during community comment. Do we have anyone online? Director Bennerat?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. We will move on from community comment. And now we have a few items on the consent agenda, 2 items on there. Is there anyone on the HRA, on the commission, that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as shown?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Pierce, second by Commissioner Jackson to approve the consent agenda as shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Now we're on to the heart of the meeting, which is the reports and recommendations portion. And in this portion of the agenda, we'll just need a favorable vote of the majority of the commissioners present to approve, unless otherwise noted. And the first matter we have before us this morning in that portion of the agenda is 4917 Eden Avenue, which is, of course, we know colloquially as the Perkins site. And Executive Director Neal.
Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Chair. We don't have everybody we need in the room for that item yet, and so staff would suggest, can we move to do the next item, the spending plan item first?
All right, sure, let's do that. Sequence will be fine. So let's move to Resolution 2021-13. And Bill Neuendorf, our Economic Development Manager for the City of Edina, will give that presentation. And this involves a presentation regarding an opportunity the state legislature and the governor have given to cities across the state to help bring us out of the pandemic, this post-pandemic era, and try to get the economy moving a little bit more effectively. So, Mr. Neuendorf, welcome. It's good to see you this morning, and go ahead with your presentation.
Yes, good morning. That's correct. The resolution this morning does address that exact situation. There were changes in Minnesota legislation this year that allows tax increment monies that have currently been collected to be reallocated and applied to new projects in order to accelerate the economy and to get things sparking again after we emerge from the pandemic here. The objectives of this new legislation is to create jobs and to promote private investment. Staff has reviewed our TIF accounts, and we found that there are 3 accounts where there are monies available in the count. These funds have already been collected and are available for this purpose. We've got some monies in the Pentagon Park District, in the Southdale 2 District. There's the largest amount. And then there's a small balance in an older TIF fund called 70th and Cahill. Altogether, we've got about $9.6 million of tax increment monies that are available for new projects, but have not been committed to either developers or public improvements. Staff is recommending that we adopt a new spending plan as required by the state statutes in order to allow these monies to be invested into new projects throughout Edina. These monies can be used to fill gaps in private development, as I mentioned. They can be applied to either brand new construction, like new office buildings, new restaurants, et cetera, even new housing potentially. They can also be applied to renovations. For example, historic movie theaters that are vacant is a good example of these types of funds. They can be applied also to public improvements that are directly related to these private investments. Roads, sidewalks, et cetera, utilities that serve those that also provide additional public benefit. And the funds can be dispersed as either loans, grants, or even as an equity stake in the project. So the legislation is pretty flexible. But to be clear, these funds can only be used for private investment. They cannot be used to build new public buildings or public parks. And they can't be used just to supplement our city's typical budget for road improvements and other public improvements. The key outcome of these funds is to spark that new investment and to deliver brick and mortar investment into the community in order to create jobs. Construction jobs are the primary driver here, but that also includes or can include jobs in the final project. So in order to tap into this funding program, the state legislation requires that we hold a public hearing, which is scheduled for next week, Wednesday, and that it also requires that we adopt the spending plan no later than the end of next year. So we have some time, but until we adopt a spending plan, we can't start investing the money. So that's why staff is recommending that we adopt this plan today so we can start applying it towards new projects. And these funds do sunset. By 2025, any monies that have not been invested will need to go back into their original TIF fund or redistributed to the counties, the schools, and the city as is normally done in an expiring TIF district. So staff recommends that that a two-step process be applied here. First, to adopt the spending plan and also a policy that guides how those funds are invested in different projects. And then the second step would be to actually identify those qualified projects on a case-by-case basis and actually approve those projects separately. Staff recommends that we be strategic in the types and locations of those projects to try to make sure that we can use these monies to improve all of Edina, not just focused in one particular area, but to try to get it throughout the commercial districts in Edina. And of course, we will and we are required to comply with all applicable state laws, regulations, reporting requirements, et cetera. So all those typical laws certainly still apply here. So in summary, this 2021 changes to Minnesota statutes allow these TIF monies to be reinvested. An example of potentially the first project to use these might be the Edina Theater. We've made a pledge to try to help them reopen their doors. These funds are the most likely source. We recommend that the spending plan be adopted after the public hearing, so in November. We also recommend that the policy that relates to that spending plan also be adopted after the public hearing. And then we would also recommend that staff sit down amongst ourselves and also with prospective developers and building owners so that we can identify more projects to get funded before the funds expire. And with that, I'm available for any questions. Also, we have Nick Anhut from Ellers and Jay Lindgren from Dorsey this morning. They were instrumental in identifying this new legislation and actually creating the legal documents that would enable these funds to be used. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Manager Neuendorf. Good presentation. And gentlemen, thank you for your assistance here on making this potentially possible. Questions from commissioners with respect to this spending plan notion? Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of questions just to put some facts around this. First of all, this is a policy that we're looking at now and not particular projects. So it kind of sets the parameters for how we would evaluate potential spending. Is that correct?
That's correct. This would strictly it would create the program that would allow us to consider future projects.
Okay, thank you. And so it isn't random or arbitrary. We've got a set of rules for making these decisions.
That's correct.
So then I'm going to go into some actual examples. So I'm thinking as you're speaking and looking through this, we're looking at a Cahill industrial plan. I know the neighbors there at 70th and Cahill are concerned about, as development happens, that intersection is going to be overwhelmed. But because we don't have a project in hand right now that would be applicable, we couldn't do something on that intersection right now at 70th and Cahill because there's no bricks and mortar involved. Is that correct?
That is correct. We would need to tie these funds to a real project.
Okay, and then we're looking also today at the public works site, and there we've got some things on deck potentially to be built, and we're looking at a sidewalk that comes from the parking garage, a bridge over the railroad. Is that the sort of thing that, because we're enabling use of that parking lot by putting that bridge in, that would potentially qualify for this?
Potentially, but not in this particular case.
Okay.
That bridge has already been approved. It's already under construction, so we can't go back and replace the funding.
Okay.
But if there were a similar public improvement related to a restaurant or another type of project, we could certainly do it.
Okay, so like the sidewalk in front of the theater is one of the things that we're looking at. So
I think that's a better and more realistic example.
Okay.
The sidewalks that surround the theater are in a really bad shape. It's very expensive to replace them. It's not in the developer's budget, and frankly, it's not in the city's budget either. But we could use these funds to make those improvements to save the developer the burden of messing up their budget with that.
Okay, thank you. It's helpful to put it into real-life context. So thank you. Those are my questions, Mr.
All right,
Chair.
thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pierce?
Thank you. So this is probably a more simple question. I don't understand the difference between this policy, and we've had several developers come forward and ask for TIF dollars. So if you could explain what's different about those two scenarios, that would help me kind of put this into context.
Sure. This was special legislation passed to really drive economic growth. So there's a few, perhaps the Pentagon Park is the best example. That TIF district has already reached its 5-year limit. So any funds that have not been obligated are kind of stranded in that district. And in that particular project, just the way the market turned out, the developer, I mean, we waited until the week before that 5-year limit to actually obligate the monies. But meanwhile, there's about $700,000 that are in that account that technically can't be spent. But this new legislation allows us to apply those monies rather than having them stranded in that account. It allows us to use them for other projects without going through the process of creating a new TIF district to extend the time. It allows us to use monies that are in the bank today, but otherwise stranded.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Other questions from commissioners? All right. So I think this summary is very helpful. And what we're basically trying to make a decision on is whether we want to take advantage of this state statute, this sort of economic development statute, this primer for a resurging economy, if you will, to help prime the pump, and use these what are called unobligated tax increments, these stranded TIF funds from these different TIF districts that total about $9.6 million to provide spending plan assistance for projects that have to qualify under the spending plan and the policy. So what you're asking us to do today is establish the plan and the policy, and then we'll have conversations later on about qualifying projects and decide how we want to use that $9.6 million. Executive Director Neal.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you could think of this as because kind of we're laying claim to these dollars and we're changing their function for future projects. And so, as Mr. Neuendorf laid out, when we come to the point where we want to spend some of these dollars, those decisions will come back to council for a review. So you're adopting something called a plan, but it's really more of a policy document.
Yep. Okay. Yes, Commissioner Pierce.
So TIF has always been extremely complicated. Lots of residents, and I'll include myself in that, have a limited, really, understanding of how they're used. And I think this actually makes it even more complicated. And so I'm going to make a statement that I know is not true, but I could understand a resident saying they believe we've overused TIF. Now we have $9.6 million that we could give back, right? I could understand and hearing someone say that. And so it was key to me to hear you say, Director Neuendorf, that these dollars are stranded, that they cannot be used for a different purpose because, and then you gave the examples of why. That kind of understanding, I think we need to be sure we can kind of draft around this so people really do understand. And I always think it's a good idea if we can use dollars to extend public benefit. Commissioner Jackson gave a couple of examples. It would have been great to say, yep, we're going to go take care of that Cahill issue, but we can't. And so that again, just adds a complexity to this that I think we definitely need to do a really good job of explaining to the community the how, why, and then the process of how we're going to choose projects.
Thank you, Commissioner.
If I could just make a point to that. You raise a very good point, Commissioner Pierce. The state law does not require it, but in the policy that's recommended, we've added a provision that recommends that public benefit be included as a measure when we consider which projects to support. We've reviewed our capital improvement plan and other planning documents and identified a number of various improvements that have been identified kind of on a wish list. If there's funding available, they'll happen. If not, they won't happen. So as we evaluate projects in the future, we'll do so with an eye towards those types of public benefits. That's something that's not, or it's a threshold that the state law does not require, but it also does not prohibit us to apply that public benefit measure. That's something we strive to do in every single TIF project. We'll do that here too.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. So we've got Resolution 2021-13, which would adopt a spending plan for the Southdale 2, Pentagon Park, and Wooddale Valley View tax increment financing districts as allowed by this new state statute. Is there a commissioner who would care to move the adoption of Resolution 2021-13?
So moved.
Second.
We got a lot of unanimity here this morning, a lot of common view of the world. Motion by Commissioner Staunton, second by both Commissioner Pierce and Jackson. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2021-13, which adopts a spending plan for unallocated tax increment financing funds as allowed by state statute, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Executive Director Neal, did you want to go back to A now, or do you want to go on to C?
Let's proceed with A.
Go back to A? Mm-hmm. All right, very good. All right, so I think this is as a segue from what Commissioner Pierce was talking to you about and TIF and the complications of TIF. And our town is full of smart people, and even smart people get confused about this thing. And some of the transmissions I've seen, people have showed me that were online from folks about the impact on the school district from establishing of a TIF district. And it just needs some clarification. And I think in the context, I was going to ask you this when we got there, but I think now is a good time to be thinking about it as part of your presentation, or maybe even Executive Director Neal, disabusing folks, or at least clarifying what's been said online about TIF, how we use TIF, and what the school district and the county continue to get as a baseline, and how we go about doing that analysis of what those two taxing districts might potentially be missing out on over the period of that TIF district, as opposed to what they'll get at the end based on the project that's proposed to be approved for TIF financing. So does that make sense?
It does. I'll try to
All right,
address
so let's
that.
go back to A, which is a potential execution of a redevelopment agreement for tax increment financing for 4917 Eden Avenue, which is the Perkins site. And I know our team from Dorsey and Whitney, Jay Lindgren and Ellers, Nick Anhut have helped you on this as well and have a positive recommendation. But go ahead, let's hear your presentation.
Sure thing, and I'll run through the presentation quickly so that we have time for discussion and any questions. So this is the proposal to approve the redevelopment agreement to use tax increment financing to support complete redevelopment at the 4917 Eden Avenue site. This is the site of Perkins. The project, as proposed, receives its preliminary approval, and it's scheduled for its final approvals next week. An image of the project that we've seen before. One of the key things and one of the really unique items of this entire negotiation has been how we can make public benefit improvements not just to the project site, but to all the surrounding roadways. And those benefits are intended to connect the site to the neighborhood to the site, and also to make sure that the traveling public can get to the site, through the site, and really create better connections for motorists, for pedestrians, and for bicyclists. Right now, there's really a lack of any complete pedestrian facility, and on 50th, where there is a sidewalk, it's really not a welcoming or friendly situation where you're on a skinny sidewalk right next to very fast-moving traffic. And so one of the key elements of all these negotiations we've had with the developer for months is how we can provide enough funding to make their project go, and then in turn have that project create so much tax increase because the market value of the property is raised so much, they'll pay so many more taxes that we can fund these types of improvements that are not otherwise in our budget. So that's one of the really unique things about this entire project. The developer has requested $5.1 million in TIF to be paid out over a 15-year term. Over the summer, city staff, the folks at Ehlers Associates, and also the folks at Dorsey Whitney have reviewed that request, analyzed it, scrutinized it, and confirmed that for a project of this scope and caliber and quality, that there is a budget gap. Unless that gap is filled, the project will not proceed. So the key terms in this redevelopment agreement, the current or the final proposed document is at 211 pages. I think in August we gave you maybe a 6-page summary of a term sheet. Once you put that into a legal contract, it's over 200 pages. But we based the content on the terms that we discussed with you in August. There should not be any surprises in there at all. We're proposing to create a 26-year redevelopment TIF district that allows us to make good on the pledge for $5.1 million to the developer to make the project a go and that would be paid over the first 15 years. Over the first 15 years, the developer will get part of the new increment. It's actually at about 70%, and then the remaining balance will go to pay for those roadway improvements. And then after that TIF note is paid off for the remainder of the TIF district, we'll be able to use those monies that will keep coming in, and even after the TIF district closes, those monies still keep coming in. We can use those to pay for those road improvements. So as in all the TIF type projects, a TIF note is pledged after the project is successfully completed. So that way it keeps the burden and the risk with the developer, not on the city. So after they successfully finish the project, deliver those public benefits, they'll be awarded the TIF note. The note has been structured for several different lookbacks and potential clawbacks, so that we will have at least 2 opportunities after we issue the note to make sure that the developer truly did need the note and is not over benefiting from that. I'd mentioned public benefits, and that's something that's a key part of this proposal. The project received very strong support from the Planning Commission, due in part to all of the public benefits, streetscapes, et cetera. It's not free to build all that. It's very expensive to build all that, and that's what we want to make sure that we can recognize. So the new sidewalks, new plaza, new art, future easements, potentially for mass transit if Metro Transit would ever build a bus stop in this area on that particular road. Public parking, there would be a permanent easement for the surface parking lot. And then I think most importantly for this project, a permanent easement for about 10,000 square feet of land along the freeway that's slated for a future off-ramp. That easement could be translated into outright ownership at some point in the future if that's the way that MnDOT wanted to go. We'll make that decision in 10, 20, 30 years when MnDOT is ready to go there. But the developer has agreed to provide those benefits. And also affordable housing. Affordable housing is very expensive to build. For this particular project, in order to build and develop the entire site, the cost is over $400,000 per unit. The developer could take an option that's in our policy of buying in. They could pay $125,000 into a pool the city could use. They've chosen, based on the city's request, to include those units in the project. It would have been cheaper for them to buy into the program, but they heard the conversation loud and clear. So they'll be including 20 units priced to families and households that earn 50% of the area median income, and those units will be affordable for a 21-year term. As we've negotiated the project, we ended up increasing the term a little bit, just to make sure that the numbers worked out and all parties were in agreement. For this program, we also added additional public benefits. That's the first of this type for Edina. We included a section on new diversity and equity goals to make sure that the developer and contractor have equal employment policies in place, which of course they do, but also to go a step further and to make sure that they make best efforts to engage more folks in the project that you don't see as often on construction projects. Women, people of color, Black, Indigenous. So the city does not formally have a policy for this, but there's been so much conversation that we felt that we should include something of this type. So there is a report that is required to follow up after the project is complete and see how they did on these goals. But there's no penalty, there's no arbitrary penalty like that. But for the first step, we wanted to make sure that we know where projects are and really make best efforts to make advances on the diversity and inclusion goals. The other key thing I mentioned is the roadway improvements. I think we touched on that earlier. So in summary, the folks at Dorsey and Whitney, Jay Lindgren and Alex Selke, have been working hard to prepare the full 200-page redevelopment agreement. It is fully consistent with the August term sheet. It's consistent with the city policies that are applicable here. And after several weeks and months of heavy negotiations and conversation, the developer is agreeable to the terms, conditions, and limitations that are in this document. So with that, staff does recommend we proceed and approve this redevelopment agreement. Of course, it is contingent upon the TIF district being created next week. That is scheduled for final action with the City Council. So there still are a few other steps in the process here. But we do recommend support of this proposal. And myself and our entire team, both Nick Anhut at Ellers, Jay Lindgren is here this morning, and then developers Nick Walton and Jared Ackman are also in the room with us. Happy to answer any questions, and turn it back to you.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Staunton?
If you could go back to slide 15, or at least it's numbered 15, I don't think it was, but so on the left-hand side, you've identified up to 5.1 million that would support the private redevelopment. How much do we anticipate will be available for the public roadway improvements?
In our budget, we have about at least 7 to 10 million available for other improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Questions from other commissioners? Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know who to direct this to, but we did have a condition on the zoning that the transportation would be acceptable to move the traffic in and out of that neighborhood. How does that condition work with signing this agreement?
Yeah, good question. So at this point, there's a lot of approvals that this project still needs. It'll be up for its final zoning approvals next Wednesday at the City Council meeting. I think we have a special presentation prepared by the city engineer that's on the agenda for next week's City Council meeting to update you fully on this new transportation plan. We have met with the neighbors on a couple occasions to discuss and answer their questions about the plan. It is early. It's a concept plan. It's not final. There's a lot of details that would need to be worked through. But this agreement and your action here this morning would be moot if the project does not get its zoning approvals. So that's...
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Pierce?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I do have a request that for this, we need to restate what the conditions were, because I've heard probably 3 different variations of that, and so I'd like for us to just ground ourselves on what the condition was. And we don't have to do that today, I don't think, but for sure, going into approval next week, we need to ground ourselves on that.
Yep, as part of the rezoning, potential rezoning approval.
Right.
Yeah, correct. Okay. Would you go back to slide 20, please? And you talked about this early on in your presentation, but I think we've all received them, at least I know I've received some pretty frustrated emails from folks in the Sunny Slope neighborhood saying, well, this doesn't do what we need to have done. And this isn't really intended to be the final product, but I think the way you talk about it, you know, people might think, well, this is the final product. So I think what's important for us to make sure that neighbors understand that we're a long way from having any kind of a engineering project in place that would deal with some of these motorized and non-motorized movement improvements that we're discussing, and they're going to have a full opportunity to provide input on that. Executive Director Neal.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would agree with that. The other element of this that's going to be complicated, and it's complicated to explain it as well, is construction timing. When you think of the number of things that are going on in that little part of the town, some under our control, some not under our control, how we time this will be kind of complicated as well.
All right, good. And the other thing I want to make clear is that, but for the establishment of a TIF district here, these projects that we were talking about from a roadway improvement standpoint or from a pedestrian movement standpoint, they're not going to happen for a long, long time, not even on our radar. So when you talk about public improvements being attached to a TIF district, that's sort of a classic example of it in my mind.
That's exactly correct. This area, I mean, it's certainly not the best layout and arrangement, but it's not in the city's capital improvement plan. It's not even on the unfunded portions of the capital improvement plan. So they're all good improvements. They definitely make the area better. But I think next week City Engineer Milner can speak to that. But that, as I mentioned in the very beginning, that's the key differentiator in this TIF agreement, is that if this project moves forward, we'll have millions of dollars available for these types of improvements. If the project does not move forward, we simply won't.
All right. And then let's go back to that whole TIF discussion. You know, right now we got a building that's over here, a piece of property. It's on the tax rolls, I think, at about $3 million. You've got a slide on that, I think. And the proposed new building is going to be worth, what, 85 million? Yeah, there you go. So it's paying about 100,000 in property taxes now that get divided between, I'll just say roughly, the state gets a little fraction of it, but the school district, the city, maybe about, what, 21, 22%, the school district a little bit more than us, and the county about half of it. If we don't do anything with respect to this and things just continue on the way they are with Perkins limping along or something else going in there, how do we go about evaluating what the normal stream of revenue would be to the school district? And we know that they're going to get, based on the 99,960 and inflationary increases in property values, they're going to continue to get their portion of that. But they're not going to get that increment that might occur if something else happened here that didn't need TIF. So how do we go about evaluating that and make a determination that, with all of our experts helping us, that this is a really good idea because 15 or 26 years from now, the property that we used to tax at $100,000 a year is going to be taxed at close to $1 million a year.
Yeah, I'll happy to speak to that in general, and I might ask Nick Anhut if he has any details to add. But in this slide, we do show the current conditions and then the projected conditions after this project goes forward. These are the only two options we're considering at this point, because we know those are legitimate options. Perkins has options for a long-term lease on the site. They can keep making pancakes and sandwiches for the next 15 years. That's one option. That is a clear option. No guarantee. Some restaurants go out of business and there's hardship and et cetera, but that is one option, the current condition. The other option that we know is a true option is the proposal that's in front of us today. And that proposal doesn't just double the value of the land and the project, it doesn't triple it. It increases it by a factor of, depending on how you do the math, 18 to 23 times the current value. It's a massive, massive increase. So we've only looked at those two options. We've not looked at a 4-story option or a 2-story option or a medical building option because none of those options are on the table. Nothing's been presented. Those are just not out there. But for the impact to the schools, it's a little bit more complicated than this slide shows. The taxing is actually determined based on the tax capacity, and that's what's frozen, not the taxes that are paid, but the tax capacity. So by that measure, the current tax capacity is about 38,000. And then the school district applies factors to get the actual money that they need to make their budget whole. They will always get that 38,000. That will never change. Their levy amount will change every year, just like everyone's does. But when this project is over, and when all the debts, all the TIF obligations are paid on it, that tax capacity will be about just under 900,000. So it increases by more than a factor of 20. Without this project, it'll stay at 38,000 for the next 15 plus years. So that's the measure.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, the other element that's happening here, though, in concert with that is Mr. Neuendorf's explained how the pie gets bigger. The other thing that happens when a property changes from a commercial industrial property to a residential property, the individual slices of that pie get different too. So in a commercial property like this, the city's cut, as you might think, is somewhere in the 9 or 10% range of what's being paid. Schools are a little different than that.
Yeah,
Counties a little bit different than that. 50% of the property tax is really heading into the fiscal disparities pool, or it's going straight to the state of Minnesota because they have a property tax on commercial property. When a property changes from a commercial property to a residential property, that's when we go from 10% of what's paid to 20% of what's paid. So it's a big difference. Not only is the pie getting bigger, but our size of our slice is getting bigger at the same time.
Commissioner Pierce, did you have? Okay, good. So, Commissioner Song.
You know, the other thing, it's important to remember that the school district doesn't get a dime less money for its operations on an annual basis, whether we do this or don't do this, and they don't get a dime more money whether we do this or don't do this. What it does is, as Executive Director Neal pointed out, makes the pie bigger, and the pie is what we get to spread our city levy and our school district levy over. So it's not that this shorthand that we're somehow shortchanging the schools is not accurate. They still get the same amount of money whether we do this or don't do this.
Good. Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. And I want to go back to the options on the table here. It's my understanding that there's a fairly limited window where this project can be done. Otherwise, it might revert back into a long-term lease with Perkins. Is that correct?
That is correct. The deadline for the developer is December 1st to close. Okay. So that's why all the zoning and financing details are coming together in early November so that they can still close on their private financing and hit that December 1st deadline.
And then, but my point, I guess, thank you, that's very helpful. But I also want to clarify that if it isn't this project, it's not going to be 2 or 3 years before something else comes. It could be 15 or 20 years before we have this opportunity again, because this is a fairly unique situation. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions for Manager Neuendorf or anyone else? We've got Nick Reuter from Reuter Walton Development, and then we've got our other experts here as well, Jay Lindgren and Nick Anhut. Well, we've got the staff is supporting the establishment of this redevelopment agreement, the approval of the redevelopment agreement. So is there a motion to approve the redevelopment agreement as proposed by staff and our experts?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Staunton to approve the redevelopment agreement as provided. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Good. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And then we've got one more matter in this portion of the agenda, and this relates to a discussion we had a couple weeks ago when we were discussing what to do with the old Public Works facility, and we've been heading in a particular direction on the southern half of it with respect to a senior co-op, but we wanted to have more linkage. We asked you to go back and check with Frauenschuh, who's been representing us, and I see Dave Anderson walked in from Frauenschuh. And we wanted a certain level of vitality and activity there. We're thinking a restaurant with both indoor and outdoor activities, and you've got something for us to hear about today that, at least on the surface of it, seems like it's headed in a good direction. So.
We do, yes. Yes, good morning. So I'll just do the introduction here, then I'll turn it over to Dave and to Brent. But as you'd mentioned, this summer the city, or the HRA, did contract with Frauenschuh to represent us as basically a broker on this piece of the Public Works site, the old Public Works site. So in late August, early September, working with Frauenschuh, they released a packet seeking qualified operators with good experience, good track record, and a lot of capacity. And we reached out to see who was available and who was qualified to potentially partner with us to bring a new restaurant hospitality concept to that portion of the site. I don't have a whole lot of graphics here tonight or this morning, but I'm excited to welcome Brent Fredericks to join us this morning. Mr. Fredericks is with Jester Concepts. He had a short commute like a few of us. He's also an Edina resident, which is always nice. But I'll turn it over to Dave. He'll tell you a little bit more about what they did to reach out in the marketplace, and then we'll turn it over to Brent to share his concept with us. This morning we're not looking for any action, but simply a conversation to see if we're going in the right direction. Ultimately, we'll want to get some input about whether or not we should proceed or how we should proceed in this matter. But with that, I'll turn it over to Dave Anderson with Frauenschuh Companies.
All right. Thank you, Manager Neuendorf. Mr. Anderson, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, good morning. Dave Anderson with Frauenschuh, 7101 West 78th Street. And as Bill mentioned, we've been working on this effort to solicit and reach out into the market. And I'll just share briefly that that really was over the course of the month of September. We initiated, there was a package, I think it was in your material today, and that was an effort to really present this to operators, experience groups, those that have multifaceted restaurant, dining, hospitality concepts. So through that outreach, we reached out to some 35 plus groups, many which operate multiple types of themes and concepts, and received some good dialogue and so forth, had some good discussions. Really, we're looking for groups that were ready in a timely fashion here to step up and continue the discussion. So the group here that we have today with us did step up, has shown interest really in all of the facets that we outlined in that solicitation. So we're pleased to have today Brent Frederick. He's the owner and chief manager of Jester Concepts. And we'll just have Brent introduce himself and his operation and talk a little bit about what they provided us in terms of their interest in the site. So happy to answer any of the questions, Mr. Chair, and thank you.
All right, good. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Frederick, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. How are you?
If you give us your full name and business address for the record, that'll be good.
My name is Brent Frederick, and my business address is 5108 Blake Road South in Edina, Minnesota. I am a resident, and my wife and my 3 kids and I live on the western side of Edina, kind of by Mirror Lake, Hopkins border area. We've lived there for about 9 years now, and this is our community, this is our home, and the kids go to school here. And when Dave presented the opportunity to have a restaurant in Edina, I jumped at the chance. So I'd like to go through my presentation here, and we can probably get through that, and then some Q&A at the end if that works for everybody.
Good, thanks, Mr. Frederick. Go ahead.
All right. Never used this thing before, so let's just see how this goes. Okay, so the first page, I wanted to kind of right away signify what we're looking to do. Something as far as the building goes, a little bit kind of on modern, but something traditional inside. We're looking to do an elevated pizza concept, which I've kind of indicated here. Restaurant, bar, event center, outdoor community event space. I know that outdoor park is an integral part of the build, so I've included it here today. So we should get started. Jester Concepts is the company that I own. We were launched in 2008. Minnesota-owned hospitality company specializing in producing restaurant concepts that deliver an unmatched experience in food, service, and atmosphere. And we pride ourselves in creating unique restaurant concepts that complement and are inspired by the location and neighborhood in which they are used. At Jester Concepts, we are driven to educate, elevate, and exceed. The education of our staff is our foundation, and this focus has built a team with passion and expert knowledge in their craft to deliver a constant, high-quality experience for our guests from start to finish. The elevated experience we strive for begins with the education and experience of our employees. We seek to exceed our team's expectations with an employee-first approach, providing our teams with the tools they need to enhance the guest experience and enrich their daily lives. I have included some of our existing restaurants. We own and manage Burrow and Parlor in the North Loop in Minneapolis. The next page here, we also run all the F&B in the Hotel Ivy downtown as well, nearby the convention center. The restaurant is Manello. It's a coastal Mediterranean Italian concept. And then Constantine is the lower level cocktail bar. What you don't see on here is, Shay will include it in a little bit, but PS Steak is a new steakhouse we just opened up a couple years ago. It's in the old location of La Bellevue, kind of by the Walker Institute in the 510 Groveland building. We also own a restaurant in St. Paul called Parlor St. Paul. Not on here, but Parlor is somewhat similar to that. So predominantly Minneapolis and St. Paul. This would be our first foray into the suburbs, but I thought, what better of a spot than the city that I live in. So, the group that helped me kind of put this together is our architect team, Shay. They're downtown. They've done a lot of hospitality concepts over the course of David Shay's lifetime. A quick little note about Shay. They were founded in 1978. They serve local, national, and international clients with acclaimed work in over 40 states. Their philosophy blends disciplines of architecture, interiors, and marketing to create cohesive brands that extend through physical space. Shay leverages expertise in each of these disciplines to create all-encompassing experiences and successful businesses, solutions in hospitality, restaurant, workplace, and retail. And some case studies. Ours is the top left there, the PS Steak. And then they also have done Baltimore and Roseville, which is a really great location as well, on another steakhouse. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, it's a little out of sequence over for us on the
Yeah,
screen. So
I wasn't
now you're
sure
good.
what you could see there, so.
Yeah, now you're
Okay.
good.
I'll get to the next one here right now.
Yeah, that's better if you use
Okay,
it.
I'll just keep an eye on that moving forward. A couple more case studies. Looks like the brick house here in White Bear Lake. They repurposed the old Aqua up there. And then J. Alexander's, I believe that one might be out of state, but it just kind of shows you the style of Shay, which is very similar to our style. So the next slide gets more into the meat of what we're looking to do. An overview of the site, local, elevated, experience. Those are the three words that come to mind when we're starting to develop this concept. As a resident of Western Edina, I'm all too familiar with the void of great local eateries to visit. We intend to bring our blend of focused hospitality and unique dining experiences to the city of Edina. So as a group, we believe that an elevated pizza concept would be warmly welcomed by the city and its residents. We would highlight an open hearth for cooking pizzas, as well as other small plates, entrees, and seasonal vegetables. We would implement a craft cocktail program that has become a staple within all of our locations. An amazing wine list is essential as well, and we would take an esoteric approach while incorporating the recognizable labels for familiarity. We would pair this concept with a secret underground bar, perfect for a late night old-fashioned, a Negroni, or a slice of pizza. The top floor would boast a private event space for family gatherings and small businesses, while being utilized for overflow dining when events are not booked. An expansive outdoor patio would sit adjacent to the restaurant, in which we would hope to extend the season and welcome guests during the spring and fall. The patio would open up to the outdoor lawn, which gives us an opportunity to welcome all residents in a community gathering space. We would activate the lawn all year round in conjunction with the city. Some of the ideas may include concerts, movies, farmers markets, fall pumpkin festivals, and a winter wonderland complete with skating rink and a candy/hot cocoa station. I put my address down at the bottom just for a resource there. So site plan and kind of a deal structure is something I believe I was told to kind of incorporate here. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but this is just some ideas that we were thinking. We would propose a building that would be a 2-story restaurant with some sort of underground element, whether it be more for prep kitchen or storage, but then also that fun kind of underground bar. The reason for the underground bar, we think it would be something fun for the city. We also have one, actually we have a couple. Constantine and the Hotel Ivy is in an underground level, and there's something fun about going underneath the ground to go to a bar. Parlor was our first bar in Minneapolis, where this was kind of subterranean, and it really kind of changed the game as far as cocktail bars and craft cocktail bars. So it's something I think that the city would welcome. So the main level would consist of 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. This is very flexible with matching level below and above. Building would be designed in a modern industrial way, as well as landscaping features and patio. We would suggest adding a few more parking stalls within our allocated space to give us access to 60 to 80 parking stalls. We would achieve this between the shared parking with the senior living that I believe United Properties is developing or would develop. Also, we would take some of the allocated space of our land and add some more parking stalls, and then I believe that there is some sort of a ramp or something nearby by Jerry's Foods that could be that could equal part of the 60 to 80 stalls. We will be offering complimentary valet as well to provoke a feeling of comfortability. The complimentary valet is something that we do at all our locations, and it's a little bit of our MO, if you will, and it's kind of goes to that hospitality piece and that experience that we like to provide. Our vision for the restaurant would be multifaceted when determining our customers' frequency. We hope to be that go-to family spot for dinner, that brunch location for family or friends after church, the date night on the weekend, or that watering hole for a midweek cocktail or glass of wine with a friend. Our proposed day parts would be every night for dinner, as well as brunch on Saturdays and Sundays. Very flexible on that, but we wouldn't propose opening for breakfast or lunch at this time other than brunch on the weekends. We believe that an elevated concept here at this location would fit well within the assortment of options on the western edge of Edina. While we believe we would not be at the upper echelon in the restaurant scene of western Edina, we do not plan to be unapproachable to any single resident or neighbor, and we will go to great lengths to be viewed as accessible. While we are flexible with any deal, we would prefer to possibly own the building and or land if possible. We would absolutely entertain any deal that the city would prefer, though. We would achieve our financing through 3 different ways, including bank financing, outside investors, and existing gesture capital. The rest of it are really just sensing images. Kind of just gives you an idea of our style of restaurants, our style of food, what it might look like, what it might feel like. And since I control the screen, maybe I'll let you know when you want to see the next one here.
Yeah, I think you can keep going on a regular
Okay.
rhythm here. I think folks are interested in seeing the outdoor activities as well.
Perfect.
At least I am.
So I will just run through these fairly quickly then. Obviously, top left have pizza and people gathering. That kind of that wood piece, that wood-fired option. We see some open flames, not just in the restaurant, but outside of the restaurant. Obviously, we'll want to be safe, but we would make sure it was secure. The private event space, kind of top middle, is I think something that maybe Edina might be lacking right now as far as the restaurants go, having that private space. I think a lot of people are going outside the city limits for that. More pizza, more cocktails. That's really kind of that's kind of our concept. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but it takes a lot to execute it extremely well. That kind of underground bar in the bottom middle. This is a little bit of the outdoor space that it could look like greenery, but fairly modern. Kind of that open flame. Could be festoon lighting. Warm, inviting, welcome. More sensing images for the underground bar. A little bit darker, a little bit more fun, a little bit more lively. We don't see this being a very large portion of the project. This could be maybe, 1,000 to 1,500 square feet. Not very big. So, and here are more of the sensing images for the lawn. When it's not being activated by the community or guests, we could also rent it out for private events, whether it be for weddings or reunions, but there's also kind of a community aspect here we'll get into on the next one. Huge fan of Christmas, by the way, and the holidays, so definitely love the idea of this skating rink and this kind of winter wonderland with cocoa stations and really making it festive. And making it festive for each season, I think, too. Some ideas for the lawn space as well. Obviously, I'm sure that's something that city officials will want to design, but I just threw in some images there, some pathways and some flowers. I see it being a gathering space, again, for concerts or movies in the park, not just for, it wouldn't be for the restaurant patrons, but for anybody that wanted to park and come by. I think that is the last one. Is there any image that you guys wanted to see again, or any page that you wanted to see again?
Yeah, good question. Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could go back to the concept drawing of the space, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. I guess it's slide 9. Yeah, that one. So I love the idea of having events outdoors and everything. I do want to raise the question that currently we're looking at for where you've got event lawn drawn on there, it's a slope.
Yeah.
So, the drop off from that sidewalk down to where the restaurant would sit is pretty severe.
Okay.
In your modeling of looking at the cost of this, have you taken into account that that's not going to be a flat surface? It's a hill. I'm going to say like a 30-degree, I don't know what the elevation is, but it's
Sure.
significant. And have you considered that? Because I think making that flat will be very expensive.
I wasn't really aware of the economics of the event lawn and who would be responsible for paying that. The conversations I've just had were very visionary, and I have not gone into the economics. I do know that there is a slope. I guess that we thought we could minimize it a little bit and have some sort of flat space. It is a fairly large area. I've walked it and I've seen it, but
Okay.
I didn't know if the whole thing was a slope or not. So.
Yeah, so I
But
just,
it's great to know.
I caution you I love the concept, I love the ideas, but I want to make sure that they're realistic so
You
that
bet.
you get a sense of what's involved in activating that space.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And then the other thing is, we're looking at this as kind of,
Your question, who activates that? Is that us or is
I
that
don't
them?
know.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be determined, right?
to
Me
be
neither.
determined, right, but if it's a steep hill, it's going to have a different activity than
Yeah.
a skating rink.
would be worth.
I did have a second question, Your Honor.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Finish your
thanks.
segue there.
Yeah, the other one, this is a small thing, but we are going to be next to a senior living facility. And like I said, I love the concept. It looks like fun. But I want to make sure that it's senior friendly, so not a really loud space. And that's a pretty granular detail, but I do want this to work together well.
Sure.
So, great. All
Could
right,
I
thank you.
respond to that real quick? My understanding of the senior living wasn't the demographic, and again, I could misunderstand because I've only known about this for about 30 days. So I'm doing my best with what I have here, but
Yeah.
I was more for an empty nester, 55 to 70-year-old, not like an assisted living where it's a little bit older.
Yeah,
So
no, you're
I think
right.
this would be a fun spot for them to go to as well. I think their kids or grandkids, that could be something that I think would be friendly to
Yeah.
them. But as far as the noise piece, I will absolutely keep that in mind. You bet.
Terrific. Yeah, I think you're correct in the observation of the demographic. I just want to, the high ceilings, it just jumped off the page at me. So
Sure.
great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Pierce.
No, I think I'm okay. I was just going to make the point that it will be worth you following up with Director Milner, because to your question, I thought the city, where that slope is, I don't think we're leveling it, but I thought the city was prepping that, and so the incline wouldn't be what it is if you go out there today. That's what I thought we were doing, but it's best to follow up with Director Milner, so you have a better idea of what actually will be there, to Commissioner Jackson's point.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sutton, any thoughts? You were the one that, I think you had the originator of this idea that, okay, senior co-op, that's fine, but let's have some active uses over there as well. Is this heading in a good direction?
I mean, I think this is a really great start. You clearly, as a resident to the west side, understand the gap and how to fill it. And you've probably been kind of thinking to yourself as you're driving over Highway 100 all the way over to 50th and France, why isn't there something closer? And there is the hilltop, and they've done a great job of kind of expanding and broadening their appeal. But it'd be great to add another destination in this area. So I think you've got that, and this is a concept worth pursuing. The things I would ask you to think about are, the programming, the activation, this outdoor space. I'm a little concerned when I hear you say that it'd be dark at breakfast and lunch during the week, because I could see certainly during any time of the year, it being a gathering place, the kind of place people might want to meet for lunch or meet for even a cup of coffee in the afternoon or something like that in that space. And that's part of what I think we'll have to kind of navigate between the city's interest and your interest as an operator, and how we keep that space kind of accessible, even if people aren't necessarily coming in for full use of the restaurant, if they want to go and sit outside and maybe get a cup of coffee or a snack or something, and not go full on. And then how it interacts with the space to the south where the co-op is contemplated. We had some conversation last week about that, and it's, to me, it's really important that this whole thing be a package, and that we figure out how it works together. It's going to be part of your customer base, clearly, because folks are right there, so you're going to want to appeal to those folks and others. I love the valet idea because I think it leverages our parking across the railroad tracks so that you can maybe minimize the on-site parking. So I'm quite excited. I think it's a great start. There's a lot of details to fill in, and my colleagues have identified a couple of those, but I'm not worried about those at the moment. Those will be things that we'll have to kind of sort out as we go through it. But bravo.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Mr. Frederick, my sentiments would be comparable to my colleagues. there's so much to like in all these images, and you call them sensing images, and indeed they are, whether it's the food or the architecture or you can just feel the energy of the place.
Good.
And the outdoor activities, and we're a long way from where we'll eventually end up, but I think, as everyone has said, we're heading in a great direction here. At the foundation of everything, one of the things that's really important for me is that you're local, and maybe more significantly, that you're really experienced. And I think that's going to be critical as we come out of the pandemic, and for your restaurant industry has been so challenged.
Yes.
I really commend you for thinking about this project in the town you live in. It's really a wonderful thing. So let's figure out how to move forward together here. I do think Commissioner Staunton raised a great point, as did the others, but how everything knits together on the seams and that transition from senior housing into the restaurant area. And I know you're going to need parking and some parking, and that's critical to an operation like yours. But if we can tie together well that ramp, and then you do the valley, as Commissioner Staunton said, I think we can solve that problem too.
Okay.
Commissioner Jackson, did that raise some other thoughts for you?
Oh, I just wanted to say this, I am really excited about this. I don't want you to take something negative
Oh,
from
no,
my
not at
comments,
all.
and I'm really pleased to see this come forward. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Pierce has a follow-on too.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to echo, I think this was an awesome start. I think that site has been vacant for 2 decades. Am I close to being right? Something like that?
Yep.
And so to be so close to having part of that property developed, and then having to be able to extend a community benefit within that whole space is pretty exciting. I was at dinner this past weekend and mentioned that we're close to being able to do something with that site, and I think folks are excited about that. And so the 2 things I would recommend, one I mentioned, you really should follow up with the city engineer to make sure you understand what's planned for that site.
Okay.
And then, even though these are kind of it's 2 separate parcels, if you could think of it that way, the way we framed it, we still want it to feel like it's kind of one piece of property. So I don't know if this is common or not, but it would be incumbent on you to really be sitting down with the developer to Mr. Chair's point, how do these things kind of link together to make it kind of fluid. I liked the visual that you had, I don't know, I'll call it a diagram that you had. I thought that was a neat way to view it. And I'm going to be at PS Steak Friday.
You will.
Yeah. So,
Excellent. Thank you.
Nice work.
Manager Newendorf, it strikes me that as we go forward on this, this might be a good project to be thinking about relative to whether there are some qualifying elements here under that, under the stranded TIF revenues, that we might think about how to solve that grade issue in there as part of an overall economic development strategy. So just a heads up on that.
If I could speak to that, Chair. There's a lot of moving parts here. So the city is also working with Confluence Design on an overall site plan for the restaurant pad and the park. Happy to share that with you. We just got a draft last night, and we'll see if we can get that to you. So there's a lot of different moving pieces here. But this type of private investment could qualify for that spending plan that we just talked about earlier. We look forward to bringing more information to you in the next few meetings about this site. Right now, we do not have a developer. We've not named United Properties. We've not named anyone as a developer. So if we're liking what we see, we should start putting some agreements together, at least tentative agreements, to show our desire to work with specific parties and get something built here. So we expect to bring more things to you in the next month.
Good. Yeah, I suspect you've heard enough here this morning to think about next steps, at least internally, and then coming back to us with some ideas on where we go next.
Yes, we did.
So, Mr. Anderson and Mr. Frederick, thanks for being here with us this morning.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Anderson,
everyone.
good
Appreciate
work.
it.
Thank you. All right, we've got one other matter in front of us this morning, and that is scheduled. The executive director wants to talk a little bit about some of the challenges we've had from a meeting standpoint. Illustrated this morning, it seems like every meeting we've had, somebody else has had, or somebody on the commission has had a challenge, and so we got to think about how to solve this problem. So we've got a full complement of commissioners at most meetings. I know we used to do it in a way where we just, even though council meetings were running late, we would take on the HRA work after the council meeting. But the way we're set up now, really nobody can go anywhere with a family or on a trip without missing a meeting of either the council or the HRA, because we're meeting every week.
Right.
So go ahead, Manager Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you've given a good background as to how we got to where we are today. I think when we think back 5 years, we were appending an HRA meeting to the end of a council meeting. And at that time, our council meetings were going long. We're going quite long. So it was not uncommon for us to commence or call to order an HRA meeting after 11 p.m. And so that was not working well for the public to participate or observe in any way. And it was at the end of a meeting, if you count the work session, we had all been in a meeting together for 6 hours probably by that time before we were starting another meeting. So we were looking for alternatives to how could we do that differently. Because we were seeing at that time, remember too, we didn't have regularly scheduled HRA meetings. We had them as needed. We moved to a regularly scheduled HRA meeting scenario because we were just having more and more development activity, more and more roles for the HRA to play in the development world. And so we had a need for more regularly scheduled HRA meetings. And so this is what we started with. It was the second and fourth Thursdays of the month, and we switched from at the end of a council meeting to a 7:30 in the morning time slot. And we really did it as a way just to see how it worked. And I think initially it worked better for the public. We had more public that would come to a meeting at 7:30 a.m. than at 11 p.m. But it did begin to, as the chair noted, began to clog your weeks, your other kind of non-council meeting weeks. And so we've had a number of discussions about this, and I just wanted to see how you felt about that, given that we are working right now on producing the 2022 meeting schedule. And as you see, it was included in your packet for today's meeting. It's a complex schedule. When you think of all the different observed religious holidays we have, boards and commission meetings that we have, and other sort of secular holidays that we observe, it's complicated to put this schedule together. So this is something that our city clerk works on. But if there is some input that you want to have or want us to look at something different, this would be the best time for us to know that. We can do it throughout the year, of course, but this is the best time for us to know that, in that we can put together the schedule for the entire year. You can then get a sense of how that might impact you when this is brought back to you in a couple of weeks.
Yes, Commissioner Pierce.
Thank you, Manager Neal. I actually put these on my calendar for next year already. And so, I say that to make the simple point that for me, it is knowing what those dates are as early as possible so I can kind of work those in. And I actually didn't have any conflicts for 2022 so far with what was on here, just doing that cursory look. The one thing I would say is for the HRA, if the meetings are supposed to start at 7:30 and end at 9, they need to start at 7:30 and end at 9, right? Because there's always the rest of the day for most of us. So that's one thing I would say. And then something that I really didn't think about until your comments, there's a benefit of having it scheduled on a certain day. so a certain routine, if you will, throughout the year, because you can kind of schedule around it. But there also might be some benefit in moving that around. And so I'm totally making this up. If, in the summer months, instead of it being on the same routine, Thursday, Friday, or the 2 Thursdays, maybe there are a couple of months when it's on a different day of the week. And all that allows for is if there are other things outside of city work that needs to be worked around, then an example of that is if I have to say I can't make a leadership team meeting because I have HRA, if that's only 2 or 3 times a year, then that's different than I'd have to miss all of them. And that's actually how it is for me right now. I would have to miss all of my leadership team meetings, which I can't do. And so I end up having to miss. And so there's some thought in there that could be a benefit to kind of not moving around kind of free flowing, but the idea of you can kind of adjust on both ends. So if there's a little bit more flexibility there.
The discussion when the council picked this particular second and fourth Thursdays, there was discussion about should we have it the same week? Should it be first and third Thursdays so that you could have council meeting on Tuesday night, HRA meeting on Thursday, and then your next week is completely clear.
Yeah.
So there was discussion
Something like
around that. We didn't do that. We went to this schedule instead. I will tell you what's normal in terms of approving the meeting schedule for next year is that we'll present this to you at your second meeting in November. That's typically the time when the council approves, because this is something the council takes an action on and approves for the upcoming year.
Commissioner Jackson, some thoughts?
Yeah, I just have a question for staff prep. To have both meetings on the same week, that would give you time to get everything ready? Because I think it would be nice to have weeks that were open for private scheduling. But I guess, do you have the turnaround time to do them both in the same week?
We used to be able to do that when we had them on the same night.
Yeah. I think the other thing we've done in direction from the council and HRA to staff was if we can cancel the meeting and cancel it early. So don't cancel it the day before, but cancel it a week before. That we could go to a system where we have one HRA meeting a month. That puts a little pressure, mostly on Bill, actually, as he's working with developers and lawyers and trying to get things through the queue. It's more of a high stakes environment. If they don't hit this date for the July meeting, they might miss it, and then they're going to get kicked into August. Sometimes that's a big deal. Sometimes that's a great motivation, actually, to get people to produce what they got to produce. So that would be another option for you if you want us to try to explore that.
You raised a good question for me. Manager Neuendorf, if we went back to the old system where the HRA and the council met on the same night, what kind of extra pressure does that put on you, your workload, which is already significant?
I don't think that makes that big of a difference, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, we did it that way for years. It does get difficult when HRA meetings start at midnight. I don't know if the best decisions or the best thought happens after midnight, but from a staff perspective, we could certainly accommodate HRA meetings being on any day, whether it's in the evening, whether it's in the morning, whether it's once a month or twice a month. We can certainly accommodate that. We have the staff to do it.
Yep.
The next question I had for you was exactly along those lines for you and Director Teague and Manager Neal. What do you foresee for the next 6 months? I mean, is it possible we could do HRA work after a council meeting and not be here till midnight or 2 in the morning like we used to do? Or is that too difficult to foresee?
Well, I mean, that's partially under our control. I can tell you we know there are we have a sense that there's notable projects that are in the queue, kind of on their way to the city. It's hard to predict what the economy has in store for us, I think, right now. But there's still a lot of redevelopment opportunity in the city, and we expect to see that continue to happen, and we can see that the HRA is going to continue to have a role in that. So I think we will see kind of this continued role, a greater role for the HRA going forward.
Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, to that point, personally, I have to put a lot of work in to prepare for these meetings, and to have both of them on the same night, I think might overwhelm me. Because it is, a lot of this stuff, especially the HRA stuff, gets complicated.
Commissioner Pierce?
I would urge us not to over-engineer this, and so I might be simplifying it way too much. But it is really important that whenever they are, if it's defined early enough, and it feels like that's going to be the case, with a little bit of flexibility, if they're supposed to start at 7:30, they need to end at 9. And if we can commit to that, I think I could almost make anything work if we can do those two things. I wouldn't be excited about doing it after the city council meeting.
I can tell you that it was exhausting, and it was, you felt like you were denying people the chance to really participate, and you weren't doing your best thinking after 11 o'clock at night either, after 5 hours going on. I continue to wrestle with how to deal with this problem of we're doing something every week. So I'm looking at the calendar for next year. I can see right now, February 10th, HRA meeting. Well, my wife had a trip planned that week, so to your point, Manager, and if there were other people who are in that same situation, I suppose you can cancel a meeting, or if there's not sufficient activity that Bill has going on, we could cancel depending on people's schedules. And Member Staunton's got some thoughts too. Commissioner Staunton.
Yeah, I kind of agree with everything that's been said, and I'd be in favor of moving them to the same week as the council meetings, whether that's the Thursday. I'd be okay any day except the morning after the council meeting, for everybody's sake. But the morning of the council meeting might be a possibility. I don't know. I'm just thinking that through. And then I like this notion of maybe by the time the week before the council meeting, the first council meeting of the month, you would know whether you needed the second meeting or not, and you'd be able to say it's canceled or not, so that we would know, we'd have it designated, but at least by then we'd know whether we were going to do a second meeting or not.
I mean, one of the things that we have started to do differently over the past couple of years is we have a regular HRA staff meeting. So, Bill and Stephanie and Carrie and Liz and a few others, we get together on a regular basis, and we're doing some advanced agenda planning. So we have a sense of when we can miss a meeting, and that's one of our priorities is if we can bunch things ahead or back, however we do it, so that we can cancel a meeting, we will do that.
Yeah.
We decided that Thursday mornings were good. I tend to agree with Commissioner Staunton. I'm thinking that if we moved the HRA meetings into the same week as the council meetings, did it on a Thursday, then at least you've freed up 2 weeks of the month where you could do planning with your family, or whether it's summer or winter. You've got 2 weeks there that you can plan around and count on, that you won't have to be thinking about having to miss a city meeting, or missing out on some responsibilities you have. So I'd be willing to entertain that idea. All these thoughts are good, of course.
So we could prepare that scenario and share it with you. Okay.
Problem with Tuesday morning is that that's Rotary morning. For 3 of us in this group, we're over there. So I think I'd stick with Thursday morning, move it to the week. We'll see what that looks like.
Okay.
Move it to the week of the council meeting and go for 7:30 to 9. Like Commissioner Pierce was saying, make sure that we get out of here on time,
Yeah, that's a really fair point. I mean, I'm sure there's people lining up at the door at 9 o'clock waiting to, the obligations that a lot of us have that start right then. We have to be mindful of that.
Okay. All right, this is good input. We'll put together a new proposal. We'll share it with you prior to, somewhere in early November, and you can have a chance to say if that's what you want to receive at the second meeting in November at the council.
Good, thanks. HRA Commissioner comments? Anybody have anything you want to share with us? Commissioner Jackson? No? Anyone else? No, I don't have anything either. Executive Director's comments have been made. Do you have anything supplemental?
Nope.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Second.
Okay, we got a motion to adjourn by Member Commissioner Pierce, second by Commissioner Jackson.
Violating our rule right before we even made
Any
it.
further discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.